In the prologue of the film, a man in a robe named Alderson wakes up in a futuristic cube-shaped room. Each wall has a hatch, and the man decides to open one of them. Behind the door, he sees a similar room and opens another hatch, hoping to find a way out. However, behind each door is the exact same room, only differing in wall color from the previous one. The man eventually enters one of them but is suddenly sliced into pieces by a metal grid. The main action of the film starts in a similar cube. A wounded man named Quentin McNeil enters another room through a hatch, where David Worth is already present. Quentin sequentially opens the next hatches, and suddenly, a frightened woman named Helen Holloway enters the room through one of them. Soon, they hear a scream from the adjacent cube, and Quentin enters it to help a girl named Joan Levin. She joins the trio, and meanwhile, Ren descends into the room. While the strangers come to their senses, Ren takes off his shoes and heads to the next room. Holding them by the laces, Ren tosses them into the next cube, and suddenly, a flamethrower activates inside it. Ren retrieves his scorched shoes, while the shocked strangers watch his confident actions. He explains that motion sensors are built into the walls, and each room needs to be checked for such traps. Before continuing their journey, Quentin suggests trying to remember how they all ended up here. Failing to figure it out, they begin to speculate about the nature of this place. Holloway suggests that either the government or aliens are involved. Soon, they all realize it's time to act. Ren tosses the shoes into the next room. It turns out to be safe, as do several following rooms, and they proceed. On their way, they hear a strange mechanical noise at regular intervals several times but can't figure out its source. In one of the transitions between rooms, Levin notices a strange set of numbers. Holloway claims it's the room number, and if so, this strange construction consists of over 500 million identical cubes. They don't have enough time or strength to go through all of them. Ren checks the next room with his method, and it seems safe. However, Ren feels that the air in this room is much drier, indicating the presence of a molecular chemical sensor that reacts only to a living person. Quentin is surprised by Ren's extensive knowledge of sensors and suddenly remembers that Ren is a famous criminal who managed to escape from 7 major prisons. Meanwhile, Ren moves on to the next cube, but this time his method fails.
Merde.
The others help Ren return to a safe room, but his face is corroded by acid, and he does not survive. Quentin worries that if even Ren missed another sensor, they definitely won't last long here. Holloway continues to try to understand why they were placed here, but Quentin urges her to focus on more immediate concerns. Quentin also suggests that they are not here by accident. Quentin is a police officer, Holloway is a doctor, Ren was an escape specialist. He then asks what the others do, and it turns out that Levin is a high school student passionate about mathematics, while Worth evasively answers that he is just an office worker. Holloway remains angry at those who kidnapped her and took all her jewelry. Suddenly, Quentin remembers that Levin wears glasses. She says she only needs them for reading, and Quentin finds it strange that they took Holloway's jewelry but left Levin's glasses. He believes that everything is not a coincidence and suggests Levin take another look at the numbers in the transitions between the rooms. Soon she notices a pattern. The room numbers with traps consist only of prime numbers. Just to be sure, they check a room with the shoes and confirm Levin is right. Over the next few hours, they go through room after room and then find themselves in a cube that leads only to traps. The only unexplored hatch is the top one, and Quentin pulls himself up to see the numbers. But as soon as he opens the door, a seemingly mentally disabled guy, Kazan, falls into the room. No one is happy about the appearance of this abnormal stranger, but Holloway starts to take care of and protect him. After a while, they find another safe room. The tired Levin is helped by Worth, who is also quite knowledgeable in mathematics. Unsuspecting Quentin goes first, but then, almost falling into a wire trap, wounded Quentin retreats back. He gets annoyed by Kazan's screams, who, frightened, stayed in the previous room, and asks Worth to go back to him and make him stop. When Worth leaves, Quentin admits that he had a bad feeling about him. Levin says he didn't deceive them and that there were indeed complex numbers in the room numbers. However, Quentin notices that her system doesn't work, and Worth likely knows that. Worth brings Kazan to the others, and tension begins to rise among them. Soon, Levin tries to find a new meaning in the room numbers, while Quentin and Worth argue about their attitudes toward the situation they find themselves in. Quentin is irritated by Worth's nihilism, and Worth is annoyed by Quentin's excessive self-confidence and thirst for power. Quentin is sure they will definitely escape, but Worth declares that there is no way out from here. His words grab everyone's attention, and now everyone wants to know why he is so certain about it.
I'm the poison. I designed the outer shell.
Worth claims he is an engineer and was simply tasked with designing the external shell, the cube. However, he knows nothing about the room's mechanism or who the client was. Holloway is convinced the government is involved, but Worth believes the cube was created by an uncontrolled bureaucratic system almost accidentally. He suggests that its original purpose has long been forgotten, and they were placed inside just to use it as intended. Quentin is not satisfied with this explanation and attacks Worth with his fists. Holloway and Levin stop him, reminding him that they still need Worth since he is the only one who knows anything about this place. Worth explains that the shell's dimensions are 403 square meters, and there is space between the inner cube and the shell. Levin calculates that there are a total of 17,576 rooms in the cube, arranged in 26 rows. Suddenly, Levin realizes that the numbers she took for room numbers are Cartesian coordinates, which can help them determine their position in the cube's grid. It turns out they are 7 rooms from the edge, and the team continues toward the shell. However, they soon discover that the coordinates of one of the rooms exceed 26, which is impossible since each row has only 26 rooms. Ignoring this oddity, they approach another hatch, and Kazan begins to repeat the word trap. Opening the door and looking into the room, they realize that there is indeed a trap that responds to voice. However, it turns out that closer to the edge of the cube, there are more traps, and there is no safe room beyond. Levin wants to go back and find another way, but Quentin suggests cautiously passing through the sound trap. Quentin doesn't want to take Kazan with them because of his unpredictability, but Holloway says they can't leave him behind. Worth claims Kazan will be silent, and he himself goes first into the room with the trap. Worth successfully reaches the next hatch, followed by Levin and Holloway. Then Quentin lowers Kazan, but he chooses a different route, and Holloway has to go down to help him. Quentin goes last, and then... In a rage, Quentin lunges at Kazan for almost costing him his life, but Holloway again defends the strange man. Finally reaching the edge, they open the last door, but behind it, they see only a bottomless abyss. Quentin suggests making a rope from their clothes and lowering someone down to find out what's at the bottom. At first, Levin is called since she is the lightest, but they don't let her go because her abilities are crucial. So instead, Holloway decides to descend. The team carefully lowers the woman down, but the rope turns out to be too short. Holloway tries to swing to reach the shell. Suddenly, the room shakes, and the team lets go of the rope. At the last moment, Quentin manages to grab the end of the rope and helps Holloway up to the hatch. But then his expression changes abruptly, and he suddenly lets go of her. Quentin tells the others that Holloway lost her grip and fell accidentally. He also urges Levin to continue calculating so they can reach the bottom as quickly as possible. However, before moving on, the team decides to get some sleep. While Worth and Kazan sleep, Quentin takes Levin to the adjacent room and suggests they continue together. He also tries to take advantage of her, but fortunately, Worth arrives just in time and knocks him down. However, Quentin gets up and starts beating Worth fiercely, and Levin realizes that Holloway didn't fall accidentally. Then Quentin throws Worth into the lower hatch to check for traps, but suddenly Worth starts laughing hysterically. The others, puzzled, descend to him and realize they are back in the room with Ren's body with the burned face.
We're going in circles. That can't be.
Quentin lunges at Levin, compelling her to determine their location, but she breaks free and suggests he figure out their next move since he hasn't been helpful. Quentin loses his previous optimism and concludes that escaping from the cube is indeed impossible. Suddenly, Worth decides to investigate the trap room that Ren couldn't access, only to find the same emptiness beyond the hatch. He realizes it wasn't them moving in circles, but rather the rooms, which explains the periodic noises and shaking. Levin understands that the coordinates for all the rooms were indicated in the room numbers, whereas she used to only focus on the starting position of the room. She suddenly recalls the room with coordinates over 27 and realizes it extends beyond the cube. However, it can only serve as a bridge in its initial position, and they entered it while she was wandering in the middle of the cube. It turns out there is a way out of the cube, but it's only accessible at a specific moment. Levin begins new calculations and concludes that the room they are in now will return to its initial position in 2 moves. Quentin suggests moving on, while Worth is concerned that they won't be able to check rooms for traps since they don't have any boots left, and Levin's scheme with prime numbers doesn't work. However, Levin asserts that it's technically possible to identify the traps, which, as it turns out, are indicated not by prime numbers but by powers of prime numbers. However, these numbers are astronomical, and she can't do math in her head. Quentin insists she try, but Levin attempts to demonstrate that a computer is necessary for such calculations. Suddenly, they are interrupted by Kazan, who instantly names the factors of the required numbers.
You're telling me Telethon Boy is a genius?
It turns out, Kazan isn't mentally challenged but is autistic with savant syndrome, possessing an extraordinary ability to instantly perform complex calculations in his mind. Levin realizes that the next room is safe, but Quentin decides to verify it by pushing Worth into it. Fortunately, Kazan's calculations were correct, and Worth survives. On the way, Quentin continues to humiliate and insult Worth, and at one point, Worth traps his head in the hatch door and then locks him in the previous room. Levin, Worth, and Kazan try to quickly move to the next room, but Quentin catches up and threatens to kill Worth. However, Worth manages to move to the lower room and abruptly opens the hatch right under Quentin. When Quentin falls, he hits his head and loses consciousness, allowing the trio to continue their journey. Soon, they find themselves in a room at one of the edges of the inner cube. Suddenly, a bridge room moves from above at high speed, shaking their room again. Then Worth and Levin move to the next room, but Kazan stays in the previous room and moves with it. By the sounds, Worth quickly calculates Kazan's location and asks him to return. Meanwhile, Levin steps on something sharp and upon closer inspection realizes it's a shard from her glasses, indicating this is where they all met. Looking at the numbers, she finds that this room will soon align with the bridge. She calls for Worth, who can't get Kazan to come out. Finally, Worth manages to persuade Kazan to return to them, after which their room starts moving. Coming to her senses after a sudden jolt, Levin opens the hatch, revealing darkness.
I was right. We should never have moved in the first place.
A few minutes later, the bridge approaches their room. Inside, Kazan opens one of the hatches in the wall, and this time they are blinded by bright light. Suddenly, dejected Worth sits down on the floor and suggests the others go on without him since he has no reason to live. Appeals not to give up prove futile, and Levin is already preparing to leave when suddenly Quentin appears behind her, impaling her with part of the door lever. Worth lunges at the frenzied Quentin to let Kazan escape but receives a blow to the stomach with the same lever. Quentin is closing in on Kazan, but Kazan manages to orient himself in time and jumps into the bridge room. Quentin follows, but at the last moment, Worth grabs him by the leg. Suddenly, the bridge room starts moving, tearing Quentin, hanging between the rooms, apart. Injured Worth crawls to the lifeless body of Levin, while Kazan emerges into the blinding light and absolute unknown. What do you think? Who and why could have built the cube? Share your thoughts in the comments below, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next videos.